All right, a very good morning to everyone, all of us here, and welcome to this webinar on agility at workplace. And thank you for having me today. It's my pleasure to share with you this very pertinent topic on agility at workplace. So thank you for the generous introduction. So I will just skip this bit of my introduction. In essence, I am what the industry call as agile transformation consultant. And it's my pleasure to have served a number of organizations, and I will also be very privileged to share with you, perhaps during the session and during the Q&A, some of the experiences I've garnered over the last 21 years. Before I move on, I'm just wanting to check if I'm heard clearly. Am I okay? Am I coming out fine? Just some response on the chat will be great, so I know that we are good to go. All right, lots of thumbs up coming up. Absolutely, thank you. So this resource, this presentation today has been derived from a number of resources, as you can see on the screen, some of which are also from the experiences I've had, agile consultancy with a number of organizations I've served. Now, a quick ask from all of you, like what Yati mentioned earlier on, we would love you to participate. I'm an agile consultant, so I'm really okay to be interrupted at any point. So the chat is always going to be active on my screen. I'm always constantly having a look at the chat box. So if you wish to, feel free to put in anything whatsoever concerning what we're discussing today. Now, if you intend to wait at the end, which is also fine, because we are going to allocate approximately 20 minutes of Q&A time that we can use to answer all the other questions. Now, just on the aspect of to have an open mind, some of the things you are going to probably hear today are going to be rather new. So my only ask is sometimes we need to unlearn to learn, and sometimes we need to relearn. So that's my only ask. Other than that, feel free to have fun, explore, ask questions, and perhaps even share your thoughts, and that might be also perfectly fine. So I'm going to start with this little sketch. I'm just going to pause and have a look at this yourself and see what you can make out of this. All right, that's interesting. And there is this interviewer who is interviewing someone for a position, presumably asking the interviewee if he is supposedly agile enough. So what he has done, he is showing his flexible ability to the interviewer, hoping to impress the interviewer. So hearing the message lies that agility is an aspect of a mental state, right? It's not so much how agile we are physically, which is also a good thing, but primarily we're talking about mental agility. So on that note, I'm happy to start the session. But perhaps some of you might be even asking me this question. Sanath, well, I think, well, I'm agile if I can manage my spouse. Well, somebody might say that. Some of you might even say, I'm agile if I can manage my children. Point taken. Some of you might even say, I think I'm agile because I can manage my boss, and that's not easy. I must be having some agility as well. And well, about people, those around you, the subordinates, your colleagues, I must be agile if I can manage them. So I guess you're right to a large extent. Agility permeates all aspects of what we do. But truly, what we're talking today is agility at a different level. And there's a saying in English, right? If you do what you've always done, you will get what you've always got. The very fact that things are perhaps to be improved only means that there is something along the lines of agility that we can gain some mastery. So that brings us to the context of today's presentation, this webinar today. I'm going to cover a number of areas spanning from now up until 12 noon. Starting off by talking about agility itself from the business stance, overview of agile, what's happening currently in the world and even in the country. And what about this whole talk about agility at workplace? Why is it such a big deal? And let's extend the future. Let's understand what's the kind of future work that's coming up and different facets of agility that we're talking about. And we deep dive into some four of that eight. And then we talk about challenges and how do we boost agility at workplace. We talk about some 12 elements. And lastly, we are going to have a little bit of fun. And that is what I call as a fun quiz. Kahoot. Some of you may have played this before. So we will do that at the end. And that's an excellent way to revise what we've been doing the whole time today. So with your permission, and if we are good, we've got a first question actually. The word agile is very subjective. How far our agility should go? Excellent question. Now you have set me at the right context actually, Yik Yong. So coming there, we're getting there. We'll definitely get into your question in a moment. So let's start with the business case. Now, for many of you, you may know this, that these two leading governing body of accountants have come together. They formed this Future of Finance group in 2021. And they were charged to basically transform this profession of finance accountancy in its broadest context and reimagine the future of this profession. So what they have come up with, and they have interestingly highlighted the need for finance and accounting to adopt an agile mindset. And they have very nicely put together a list of 5 core skills that I'd like to share now. And interestingly, you can see down the list, the ability to be agile has been put in, has been inserted, and as one of the core skills this profession should be adopting now and in the future. So that is where we come from. So that sets the context of what we're talking today and the relevance of the discussion in what we are doing here in MIA and the governing regulatory body in the country and all the other members as such. Now, what do we see from the global perspective? And we look at the adoption of agile principles and practices. Now, this report has risen of a couple of months back, and it has highlighted finance and accounting a long way to go in terms of its adoption of agile principles and practices as opposed to some other industry verticals. So that presents a huge opportunity for this profession to scale up in its agile adoption. Okay, so that is the first bit. And I'm going to move on to answer the question from Yik Yong earlier on the chat. He asked this question, how agile is agile, basically, right? So let's talk about this word agile and why do we even talk about this? Why? Now, we can't help but introduce 4 very important letters here. The first one being volatility. It's really about the rate of change, right? Things are changing so often, and sometimes it's just so hard to keep up. Things are very unclear, the uncertainty that comes around us. It's just so unclear what to do now. And the complexity that brings, the factors that involved, so many of them, and decision making has become harder than it has ever been in the past. And lastly, ambiguity just talks about the lack of clarity. Now, just pause for a moment, right? Think about volatility, the rate of change. Think about what used to be in the profession a decade or more ago, or maybe just 5, 6 years ago, and look at what's happening now, post-pandemic and pre-pandemic, the complexity that you are now involved in, the ambiguity in your work. Now, is it true for you? I'm just asking a question, and I like this to be a response in the chat for all of you, if you can. Please type in on the chat box if you feel you have already felt the heat of VUCA. If it's all VUCA, just type in VUCA. If it's just probably V for you, or U, or C, or A, either one is fine. Or maybe none at all. You don't see the heat. It's probably okay for you. Then you can just say, doesn't apply for me. So go ahead on the chat. Is VUCA one that you feel is coming your way, or you're already feeling it right now? The rate of change, the clarity, the decision-making challenges that you face, the uncertainty that you go through. So tell me on the chat box, type V, U, C, A if it's all four, or just B, or U, or C, or A. Go ahead on the chat box. Okay, thank you, Yu Kyang. You are the first to reply. Interesting. We have a combination of some of us who just mentioned B, C, and A. We thought that U. A lot of you are mentioning VUCA as a whole, which is interesting and expected. Thank you. More responses coming. Absolutely. Absolutely. UNC for some of you. A lot of responses are coming on V and C. I gather that change or rate of change is affecting you a lot. A being the case as well for many of you. All right, absolutely, excellent. Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, so keep the responses coming. So that's the question, right? Now, the first thing for change is to own the problem, right? And that's exactly what we're doing now. We're owning that this is a problem, right? We are not brushing it aside. It is a problem. So that begs the next question, right? I mean, this whole jargon about agile and agility, what's it all about? I mean, I use the word agile, and this topic of today's webinar is agility at workplace. Is there a difference? Of course, there is. And jokes aside, when I asked this question once to someone, this person replied, yes, it's spelled differently. It must mean different things. So yes, it's true. It's not the same. So when we talk about agile, we're talking about doing agile, right? Getting into the practice. We talk about agility. It's about being agile. Being and doing is not the same thing, right? It takes time to be agile. You could start agile tomorrow. You could takes time to be agile, and therefore agility is a process, right? It's a transformation over time. So in short, agile is the practices of agile principles and techniques. You can do it right now, even after this course, or if you're already doing it. Agility takes time to be part of your DNA, right? The way you do things. Your being is agility. Okay, if that clarifies the two. Now, then comes the next question, right? So why? What's the big deal? I like to talk about the benefits. And as I'm talking to you right now, I want you to probably put one of these words in the chat box, one word that resonates with you, as in, why do you think it's important to adopt agility in where you are, in the organization you are, in the project team you are, in the operation teams you are? Just pick out one word that touches the most impact for you. And I'm going to run through some of these benefits. The first one being commercial benefits. Obviously, we don't even talk about agility if there's no such benefits, right? And there's obviously many, many benefits. And some of these are rather indirect, meaning it happens through the process of implementing agility. You will find these commercial benefits. Then you have the workforce related benefits to do with a lot of collaboration, the engagement, the morale, the reduction of silos, and so on and so forth. And then you also have these organizational benefits. Now, here we talk about the long-term planning, the roadmap, the innovation, the autonomy of the team, the productivity, goal setting, the OKRs, and so on. So, go on the chat. Just one word that you think, if there's just one thing that can happen in my organization, it would be great. So, what is that one thing that resonates with you most here? One thing, one word that you can insert on the chat. Go ahead. Just one word. Right, we've got some responses now. Decision making. We've got Sharil. Sharil, you mentioned about decision making. Would you want to perhaps unmute yourself and ask, or probably just share what you mean by decision making, if you would like to. Otherwise, feel free to share on the chat. What about the rest of you? I suppose all of that resonates with you then. So if you're not going to insert anything, then I suppose all that you see on the screen is true. Am I correct to assume that? Okay, we've got adaptability coming. Yeah, we've got Yuk Yong that says yes, all of those are relevant. Any other takers? Are these relevant for you? You know this rule called the Pareto rule, right? It says that if you were to identify 20% of the core problems, you will overcome 80% of issues in the organization. So if you only need to know the 20% of the core issues, and that's what I'm asking, if there is that little one or two things that you need to fix, and that might fix most of those issues. Absolutely. Thank you for that. So let's move on. And I think there's a number of responses coming on with the word productivity. That seems like a good word. And absolutely, agile and agility has been crafted to improve productivity. And just for the sake of explaining this word productivity, since the number of you who have inserted that, productivity can be broken up into two very words. It's capacity and capability. Right? So a lot of us talk about productivity, but really when you ask this question, what is your capacity and what is your capability? Together, it forms this one word, productivity. All right, so on that note, let's move on. Let's talk about the definition itself. What is agility at workplace? It essentially talks about an organization's ability to adapt quickly. It's interesting, right? The word quickly is important because if you just left the word quickly out, just adapt, it's not good enough, right? Ability to adapt quickly to changes in its environment, market conditions, customer needs, and internal dynamics. A customer can be your internal customers, that's always often forgotten, your teammates, your employees, and obviously customer can also mean external ones, your regulatory body, your stakeholders may all fall under this umbrella of customer, and internal dynamics, the challenges, the issues faced internally in the organization. So this ability to adapt is important, right? Absolutely. Now let's get on to the next bit. Let's talk about what's going on right now. So we know, well, yes, the two governing body, the largest governing bodies in the world, they've already mentioned that agility is coming our way and we must embrace it in years to come. In the whole talk about generative AI and all that stuff, if we are not agile, we are not able to embrace this transformation. So agility, if you ask me, is the prerequisite behind any form of digital transformation that we talk about. It's absolutely important. So, having said that, what's going on currently? Well, if you look around you, you'll find that there is a severe lack of agility among project teams or operations teams and leaders. And that's causing a huge problem because of this lack of understanding. There's also limited adoption of agility across organizations, especially in the finance sector. So this two state of affairs is really, really one that we need to address, especially in this part of the world. Now, fortunately, we're not too far off because globally speaking, if you look at some of the findings globally, a lot of organizations are trying to scale up. Of course, what you see on the screen, these are average statistics, but the organizations have gone up to 70, 80% agility. There's some of them are far lesser, but you look at what it is, there's a long way to go. So you may assume or may probably imagine that the stats could be somewhat closer to what you see, or even lesser in this country, in Malaysia specifically. So that's where things are at the moment, right? So the question is, so what? So what? So let's do something about it, right? Let's start this whole webinar that's been arranged by MIA for all of us here today is to address this gap. And of course, at the end, Yati will talk to you about what we should be doing moving forward. So again, talking about agility at workplace. Well, if you ask any company, they will tell you, well, we want to be agile. There's no company I know that do not want this. Absolutely no one. But unfortunately, they do not have the culture to support agility. You want to do it, but you don't have the culture. So why is this word culture coming up again? And there's another word here that talks about culture. Leaders who want end-to-end agile need an agile employee environment. Obviously, right? It just happened like that. So again, the word culture is coming up. Changing the workplace culture is necessary in most companies. So agility is talking about people, and it's culture that we're talking about. And that's precisely the reason why we're talking about workplace, right? Workplace formed by people and over time culture. So this word agility and workplace and culture affects an organization a lot. The question is your culture customer focused and responsive or adaptive? Or on the other hand, the right hand is the opposite side. Are you driven by a lot of bureaucratic processes and excessive workflows? Question is, are you on the left or are you on the right? So that's a question that I'd like you to ponder, not answer perhaps now. That's probably a huge question to answer, but please reflect on these two opposite poles. On one hand, you've got customer focus and responsiveness, adaptivity. On the other hand, you've got bureaucratic processes and workflows that don't serve you. Absolutely. So if that's something to think about, I'll just move on and share with you another statistics. Companies with agile executives, that means executives or leaders who are trained in agility, they're adopting it, they're practicing it, they have seen perpetual 25% on average higher profit margins than their peer companies. And you ask me, this is huge. This it's in itself should be a motivation to adopt agility. Absolutely a staggering figure, if you ask me. So, if this is important, the statistics show us that yes, we should do it. So, what's next? So, let's talk about something a bit different. And I wanted to talk about this today because remember, what we're talking about today will become the reality tomorrow. When I say tomorrow, it's not years to come anymore, right? It could be months down the road. And in fact, it's already happening in some organizations. So I wanted this session today to be educational as well. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the trends that's happening around the world and some of the directions that we should be aware of. And I call this future of work. First thing, omni-connected experience is what we're going to talk about. And before I just share this video, which will hopefully give you some light on this topic. This word omni-connectedness does not mean that we're connected 24/7, right? It's quite the opposite. Now, I'm afraid I'll just have to stop share to see that I've shared the audio before I share again. Just to see that my audio is on. Okay, coming up. All right. Okay, so let's watch this little video. I hope the audio comes on for you.
Feeling connected.
Being included.
Knowing we belong.
This is Omni-Connected. It's about ensuring everyone has equal quality of experience,
No matter where they work.
And every voice is heard.
True Omni-Connected experiences comes down to us.
And our behaviors.
And the technology we use.
Together we foster environments where we build a sense of community in our teams.
Where we look out for each other. And take the time to care deeply for each other.
Where we understand the flexibility we all need in our work and lives to support our individual well-being and productivity.
Because when we all feel seen, safe, and connected,
regardless of our physical locations,
we are empowered to speak up
and have the courage to voice our needs
as well as our ideas.
Omni-Connected doesn't mean being connected all the time.
It's about being connected in smarter ways.
and knowing when it's time to disconnect too. Through omni-connected experiences, we will evolve and grow together.
For a new and better way of working.
All right, so I hope that video was clear. And this word omni-connected is coming out very strongly. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of this word before this video, but the interesting finding is that if the organization set up an omni-connected atmosphere for its employees, it accounts for 59% of their intention to stay in the company. So you have loyalty already built in, absolutely. And organizations where people omni-connected stand to gain a 5% revenue growth boost, and that's already a motivation to look into omni-connectedness. So just get it right? Omni-connected is not just so much the fact that you're working 24/7, and that's actually a wrong misconception. But really, employees are looking to their employers to help meet their individual, relational, and purposeful needs, and omni-connected allows for that. And what exactly is these three things? And that's something I want to talk about. The first thing, obviously, it's about me, right? We always start understanding whether it's not so much only financial, the emotional, mental needs. Employees are increasingly looking at organizations for that. And there's obviously also the we needs, the collective needs, the ones that come together, and the me and you needs, the relational needs. So that's the idea of omni-connectedness. And it's something that it's worth looking into and talking about. Along the same lines is this other term that also coming up strongly. It's the word called productivity anywhere. When people can work anywhere, they are better off. So what does that mean? What it really means is most people want hybrid work and flexible work arrangements to thrive and be happy at work. So, what does the stat tell us? It tells us that productivity anyway is linked to growth, and 63% of high growth organizations have enabled productivity anyway. On the other hand, conversely, 69% of negative or no growth companies are still focused on purely going to physical work rather than having this ability to work from anywhere. Now, it's not so much, you know, asking people to stay at home or asking them to be at work, but to institutionalize the mechanism to enable them to achieve the level of productivity regardless of where they are. Now, putting together these two things we just talked about, omni-connectedness and productivity anywhere, accounts for 7.4% revenue growth boost per year. And that's staggering if you ask me. That alone is the motivation to think about this a bit more seriously. Now I'm going to ask you a question. And again, this webinar today is educational. It's no intention for anyone to imply anything. We're just here learning about these ideas and discussions. Feel free to feel safe about sharing your thoughts. The question I'd like to ask you, is omni-connected and productivity anywhere worth exploring in your organization? Now, go ahead on the chat. So this question again, what's the meaning of omni? Multi-channel, right? So there's already a response there on the chat. Omni-connected is the complete experience of work. Absolutely. Thank you for those, the sharing from Marjana, right? Marjania. Thank you for that. Absolutely. It requires strong discipline from the team. So more than the discipline, I would think the need is to have this environment set up first, right? Once the environment is there, it takes time for people to get used to this idea, and then it becomes part of your culture, and then you see the benefits coming through. So the question again that I would like you to share on the chat, is it a yes, a no, or maybe, or perhaps, or I don't know? What do you think? Is this something that's worth exploring in your organization, or perhaps just within your team? Forget about the company. Can this be something that you could do within your team? Okay, some responses. Remember, a no is also fine. Or perhaps, or maybe it doesn't work for us, or whatever. Just your thoughts. Well, interestingly, we've got more yeses than no, perhaps just one no so far. A comment from Sharil, when we're connected, we feel a sense of belonging and ownership. Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. And that increases discipline, commitment to each other. Absolutely. You've got that safety net, right, Sharil? That's what you're talking about. And a number of yeses too. Brilliant. So that's a question, right? So yes, there is an opportunity for us to make a difference. And we're talking about the environment that allows for omni-connectedness and productivity anywhere to thrive, right? We're talking about the environment. Absolutely. And I agree with, yes, the policies must be in place, and not so much also the policies, right? You've got to have the infrastructure, the IT systems must enable you. And given that you are involved in regulatory work, there has to be adequate level of security in place. So it's not something that we can do it overnight, but it's an opportunity, right? An opportunity for us to look at this in the near future. And it's not as if many organizations have not done it. They have, right? So it's just moving there. It's a matter of time. Absolutely. Okay, good. Now let's get to the heart of what we're talking about today, right? We talked so much about agility, the definition of agility at the workplace, the future of work. You understand omni-connectedness, and productivity anywhere, and what the survey tells us, that agile executives do stand to make a difference. There's a lot of bottom line issues that we can benefit from in agility. Now let's talk about, if there are, what aspects of agility that we talk about. In fact, I call it facets. The many faces of agility, right? That apparently 8 faces. And we talk about that now. So the phases of agility, the facets, if you like, whatever you want to use, whether it's aspects or faces or facets, to me, it's just one and the same thing. So the first thing is operational agility, right? So again, we're talking about designing and implementing agile practices and adaptable workflows. It just doesn't happen, right? If your workflow is very bureaucratic, it's not lean, there's a lot of waste, there's a lot of unnecessary delays, that is not going to help for sure. Then comes emotional agility, absolutely important, right? What's going on inside us? That turbulence, right? Am I able to manage that turbulence inside me, the emotions? Am I able to pivot? That is emotional agility. What about learning agility? My ability to and willingness to acquire new expertise quickly, right? Team agility. Remember, you're not working in isolation. It's the capacity of teams to self-organize and achieve their goals perpetually. What about leadership? It's so important, right? What if leaders themselves are operating in a very old school, a very fixed approach and not agile? And that's going to be a problem. So you want leaders who are able to inspire, motivate their teams, and adapt themselves through times of change and uncertainty. Technology agility, and we cannot avoid this in this age of AI and transformation. This is very important, especially when we talk about innovation, automation, and so on and so forth. And organization itself has to be agile, right? How do they quickly adapt to changes in the market dynamics, market forces, the nature of legislation changes, and so on and so forth. And of course, cultural agility is the ability of the organization itself to embrace diversity, inclusiveness, cultural differences, both internally among its employees and externally with partners and customers. So these 8 are the overarching umbrella of what I call the 8 facets of agility. And now you can see perhaps this understanding of agility is far and wide. And perhaps some of you might have also heard of this word agile transformation happening in many organizations, right? Now, this takes time. And you see why it takes time. The breadth of what we're talking about, indeed. Now, what we're going to do today, given the time and space we have, we are just going to deep dive into the first 4, right? We're going to deep dive into the first 4, and what we're talking about is really the operational. Let's deep dive about that. Let's talk about emotional a bit more, learning a bit more, and team agility a bit more. So starting off with the first one, operational agility. Well, it really involves designing, implementing agile practices, adaptable workflows and procedures. And if I can just add one more, it should also be lean, right? What if your processes are not lean, right? They're bureaucratic, they're inefficient, they're very heavy, they're not supporting your interest, and you should look at those two as well. So ultimately, operational agility provides executives with guide, accelerate growth and innovation. So what are we talking about really? I mean, if you were to decompose the stages, I would say let's start with just learning how agile really works. Just get to the basics and understand where agile does or does not work. Right? Remember, agile is not a one size fit all for everything. Start small, right? Remember, agile adoption is a change management initiative. And like all initiatives, there are bound to be resistance, right? So start small and spread success stories. And the last bit is to allow teams over time, of course, to customize their agile practice. And this is so important because if a practice is not serving you, if a process is not serving you, you've got to customize it. And that's part of being agile, right? And this ability to do these, it's important as part of operational agility. Any questions now? So we're going to talk about the 4 different aspects, right? We just finished the first one, operational agility. We're going to the second one. Any questions? I'm going to pause here for a moment to check if you're good. If it's all good, can you just probably put a thumbs up for me? Or if it's not good, you can also have a thumbs down. That's really fine. Okay, thank you so much. All right, good. See, that's feedback. Now you're allowing me to progress to the next part. Thank you for giving me the green light. So next, go to emotional agility. That's interesting. Wow, that's a hot topic, right? Well, emotional agility is the ability to navigate and manage one's emotions effectively and adapt to changing emotional situations. And a lot of you must have heard people saying this, right? You know what? Don't be emotional. It's not quite true, right? That's not quite right if you ask me, because we are always emotional. We are emotional being. The question is, are you allowing the emotion to direct and dictate your thought patterns, to affect your emotional state and your outcomes and people around you? So that's the problem. It's not so much the emotion. In fact, happiness is an emotion. It's a very healthy emotion. When you're feeling a bit stressed, that's an emotion too, right? You're feeling something, you don't feel something right inside you. But the question is, do I have the ability to navigate? Now, I got to pause for a moment. It's not so much the ability to navigate also, right? It's how long you take to navigate, right? That's also important because you might be feeling a bit down, which is normal, right? We do go through that sort of emotions, but how long do we take to pivot out of that state? Now, that is your emotional agility. The time you take to pivot and navigate your thought process from that feeling of uncomfortable inside you. That is what we're talking about. So ultimately, by doing so, right, by being able to pivot in the shortest time, obviously, can help you alleviate stress, because stress is the prolonged feeling that's going on inside you, right? Stress happens not just overnight, right? It takes time to build up, right? And that affects your performance and your morale and everything else. So I'm going to run through a little experiment for you. And this experiment was popularized by Professor Daniel. And I want to run through this with you right now. And that's really nice. I like this experiment so much because it gives us the understanding of what these thought patterns do to us. Now, the question is this, right? Reflect for 1 minute how you spent your time yesterday. Yesterday was a Sunday, right? How you spent your time yesterday, but just do not think of a polar bear. I repeat my question. I want you to think about how you spent the time yesterday, what you did, where you went, who you spoke to, perhaps what you ate. But remember, you must not think of a polar bear. Okay, so I'm going to start this experiment now. You've got a 1 minute countdown. Okay, let's start now. Remember, you're not supposed to think of a polar bear. Everything else except polar bear. Okay, let's start. Reflect on what you did the whole of yesterday, being a Sunday, what you did, where you went, what you ate, who you spoke to. Okay, 10 seconds more. Don't think of polar bear, just think of what you did, where you went, what you ate, who you spoke to. Okay, time is up. So I'm going to ask you from the chat, did you ever think of a polar bear? So please put your response on the chat. You can just type Y if you want. Yes, I did. Or no, I didn't at all. That 1 minute, I didn't think of a polar bear at all. Okay, good. Okay. Okay. Okay, good. All right. No. Okay, good. How many of you have thought about thinking about a polar bear and then realize you're not supposed to think of a polar bear? While you were, thinking of what you did, you thought about the fact that I'm not supposed to think of a polar bear, because that's also thinking of a polar bear. The fact that you're thinking that you should not be thinking of a polar bear. Okay, now we get some answers here. Someone was saying yes. So, well, the point is this. This experiment was done by Professor Daniel. He had two groups, right? One group, he said what you just did, this question. Another group, he told them that you only think of a polar bear. So the first group, when he said do not think of a polar bear, they thought more about polar bear than the other group that he said to think of a polar bear. So you had one group and the control group, right? So of course the example given was polar bear, right? But it was a situation that was very agitated. There was a very confrontational situation, a situation where you were hurled certain abusive remarks, or you were affected emotionally. It is so easy. That's like the polar bear, right? You keep thinking about it. You keep thinking about it. You keep thinking about it over and over again, right? Polar bear was an example that probably we don't even have in this country. We don't have polar bears here at all, by the way, other than the zoo. But probably if I said a monkey, you might think about it more. But jokes aside, that was the point. So what Professor Daniel is trying to allude to the fact that research shows that attempting to minimize or ignore thoughts and emotions serves only to amplify them. So by suppressing, by saying, no, I don't want to, I amplify it, right? And that has happened a lot of times, right? The moment we think about certain thing and we keep wanting not to have the thought, it keeps coming and coming. In fact, it comes even more, actually. So the point he's trying to make is, don't try to suppress your inner emotions. So if you don't suppress, what do you do then? So what he's trying to say is, you approach them in a mindful, values-driven, and productive way. Of course, this takes a bit of training, and that's not something we can possibly do right now. In a full-fledged program, we go through this sort of approach to help you to harness this ability. But suffice to know, this is what we do in emotional agility, right? And the point is what I made earlier on, right? It's not as if we don't feel hurt. Absolutely not. We all go through these emotions. The question is, how quick are we able to pivot from that feeling? Because if we don't, it starts to affect me and others around me, and ultimately my work, obviously. So that's the point, right? I hope I'm making it clear. I know it's a lot of stuff going on here, but just giving you the gist of things. Are we good? Just checking. Okay, thank you for that feedback. Now let's move on to the third one, right? What we just do, we just finished operational. We talked about that. We just talked about emotional. And let's move on to learning agility. Oh, that's so important, right? Learning agility is the willingness. Now, take note of the highlighted line. The willingness and ability is not just the ability, right? Sometimes we're not willing. The willingness and the ability of individuals and teams to acquire new expertise quickly and apply it in various contexts. That is learning agility. Sometimes we are very quick at learning things, but you don't want to learn it, right? That's also a problem. So what does research tell us? 18% research shows that percentage of agile learners might be as low as 15%. And that 15% employees in that little pie are 18 times more likely to be high potential employees than colleagues who lack learning agility. So that 15% pie can perform 18 times better in some regards. So that's what the survey tells us. So what do we do now? Now that we know it's important. Well, the few things, high level ideas. Number one, being able to navigate newness. Remember, learning is something new, right? Like even today, right? For some of us here in this call, we might be open to some ideas. For some of us in this call, perhaps you may have some ideas inside you that is holding you back from accepting some new ideas coming inside you. And this conflict is always happening internally. So what's happening here? So the ones who are able to navigate newness can undertake work, can handle complex situations with no previous experience. Interesting. What about understanding others, right? Remember, learning is not just about reading and stuff like that, right? It's about understanding people, empathizing different perspectives, and even anticipating different perspectives. It's one thing empathizing, and one thing about being closed. I don't think you should be saying this. I don't expect he said to have said that, right? So that's part of being agile, right? You know that everybody is different. And the third one is being self-aware from the perspective of seeking assistance is not a sign of weakness, right? Just saying, I don't know, just saying, I need help. A lot of us don't do that, right? Being able to reflect internally and improve. Just knowing that I made a mistake, just knowing that that was not right, just knowing that I could have done better. That reflection, right? And proactively curious, like just being like a child, a small child, just asking why, why. We don't ask why enough, do we? So that's learning agility in short. Of course, there's a lot of stuff going on here, but I'm making it a bit simple for the sake of time. Okay, so we got some interesting response. Yes, some of us said yes as first glance. Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to the last bit. Team agility. Why is it so important? And without even me having to explain it, you probably know that we are all team players, aren't we? The ability to self-organize and self-direct, the two different words here, self-organize and self-direct. Self-organize meaning the team can distribute their workload among themselves without being told. And self-direct is they are able to make decisions themselves without being told how to. So this is the ability of the team to evolve and have the ability to achieve that. Now, this is team agility. And that's so important, right? In Agile, we talk about empowered teams. And if you look at the progression of this flow, right? I'm going to show you the progression, right? And if you look at what we see on the high end, the yellow, right? That's the high performance teams. What do you see here? But you cannot be high performance if you are not empowered in the first place. And I talk to a lot of companies and I have consulting sessions and coaching sessions. I've always heard leaders telling me that, you know what, Sanat, our team is empowered. Okay, are you sure? Now, what do you mean by an empowered team? That's a good question, right? And one of the hallmarks of an empowered team is obviously the fact that they have control, right? They have the ability to take charge, and with little or no interventions, they have that ability because they self-organize themselves, they're self-directed, and they're empowered. But if you, on the other hand, have organizations where the leaders are always micromanaging, uh, there's a lack of trust going on, always looking and harping on little mistakes the team make, you can never get empowered teams. No way. Absolutely no way. And forget about high performance. That's even harder, right? And there are separate set of criteria to be high performance teams. And let's not get there yet. But let's just talk about empowered teams. Even this much, it's easily said than done. And I talk a lot about this, and we do coaching sessions to achieve that. So all in all, what we talk about here is the four facets. Remember, there are eight, right? There are eight, but I'm just talking about four. We just spoke about operational agility, talking about the bureaucratic processes, the little delays and work process and workflow that needs to be optimized. And you've got the emotional state. How do you pivot from the emotional turbulence that's going on inside? And you've got your learning agility. How do you embrace newness? How do you empathize? How do you self-aware and look at newness and so on? And finally, what we just saw, the team agility, the ability to be empowered to achieve high performance. Now, there's a whole lot of things going on here, really. And a lot of things have been simplified for the purpose of this webinar. But indeed, these are huge, very important stuffs. Now, let's have a little exercise. And it's a fun exercise, really. I'm just going to share this little QR, if you can scan it, and just rate. Where do you think your organization stand? Remember, this is just purely an anonymous survey. There's no mention of anyone's name whatsoever. It's just a personal observation. We are learning here as part of this webinar. Where do you think you stand at the moment? Okay, from the perspective of operational agility, emotional agility. So take your mobile device and just scan this QR, and you should be able to insert your response. If the technology works. Yep, I think it does. Okay, so you can just slide the bar, right? If you think you're more on the 10, then you move that bar towards 10. If you're lesser, then it's on the left, right? That's what you do, right? Oops. Okay, we've got some responses that's coming up. So, all right, great. A lot of you have responded. Got about 14 responses so far. Okay, the more people are leaning towards learning agility as opposed to perhaps emotional agility. It seems like a weaker side of things that's going on. Okay, any more responses coming up? Okay, we've got 41 responses now. The average seems to show or indicate more of you are on the learning agility quadrant. You feel as if right now the organization has to some extent some kind of ability for people to learn effectively. Operational agility can be improved. It's at 6. Emotional agility is at the weakest. Let me see if there's more responses coming up. Okay, yes, I am taking that most of you have responded. Anyone still thinking? Thinking very hard. All right. Okay, good. So it's interesting, right? So I do see this a common trend. Even in my previous sessions in other entities, I have noticed that emotional agility seem to be rated, if not the lowest, and probably one of the lowest. So that's like a common trend I observe. Okay. All right. So on that note, let's move on, right? Let's move on. Thank you for your responses. So I'm moving to the third or the second last topic for today. We're almost coming to the tail end, but this is important, right? Because at the end of the day, you're probably going to ask me this question. Even if you didn't ask me, you probably ask me anyway. What have you seen as the challenges? Now, these are some of the challenges I have seen myself in my experience of doing this work, agile transformation. I've seen these challenges happening in the places that I went and worked and consulted. The first challenge: organizations are, when I observe, they always focus on attracting new talent. There's a lot of thrust energy on acquiring new talent, but not often helping existing employees feel a sense of purpose. Now, I'm not sure whether you can resonate that. And remember, 9 out of 10 times, your employee is also your customer. And remember, leaders can make purpose part of the culture by embedding this engagement in a lot of your career development, town hall meetings, and so on. Okay, so there has to be a balance, right, between how do you engage your new ones or look for the new ones, and how do you nurture existing employees. That's number one, right? Number two, very common, right? Very common. Leaders adopting a command control approach or micromanaging and trying to dictate or direct the team. Basically, command and control meaning direct, dictate, telling them what to do. And there's always a lack of autonomy as a result. So people just come to work, do what they do, they leave. This is what I call as passive compliance, right? That's just passive. There's no real motivation to make a difference. And there's lack of accountability because they're just doing what has been told. They don't need to take charge. They don't need to worry about how things go because they're just told to do and they just do it. And this has to change, right? And the statistics say that 53% of leaders still prioritize this command and control approach over the employee's ability to be accountable and empowered. And this is the problem, right? So, what should happen then? We should move towards giving people more autonomy and empower them in the process. Of course, it's a question of balance, right? At what point do you empower them? At what point you want to tell them? Because there's always a question of balance. So I'm not saying from tomorrow onwards, let go completely. I'm saying it takes time, right? People need to feel accountable, they feel empowered, and over time they become responsible. Number three, I have seen a lot of times that organizations have invested in on-site work improvement rather than trying to be productive anywhere. Remember, we talked about this idea of productivity anywhere. So the balance is what's lacking, right? Do we have that ability? Because people also want their own ability to do what's important for them, work from home, but yet achieve the desired outcomes. And I have seen organizations that do that have achieved phenomenal results. Number four, digital skills have decreased. Now that's quite worrying. And what does the statistics say? Only 31% of employees are confident their skills will be relevant the next 5 years. Only 31%. So meaning to say what you know today may not be relevant within the next couple of years. So what should happen is to build more digital literacy, to encourage innovation, better customer experience, and so on and so forth. And the last challenge I'd like to share is the very fact that leaders, sometimes I know of leaders who use the word agile very wrongly. You know what they tell me? Okay, guys, you've gone for training, right? So now after this, you should be agile. Okay, and whatever I tell you, anytime I tell you whatever you do, you must do it because you're supposed to change anytime. Okay, so this is again one of the most misused or misinterpreted or wrongly understood concept of agile. Remember, leaders should differentiate between the journey and the destination. Yes, the journey can be agile. The destination should be fairly firm, right? Then they should articulate the end goal or destination clearly, although the direction or the journey may differ, right? So differentiate between the journey and the destination. If you keep changing the destination so very often, it disrupts the team, and there's no way the team can be agile. Absolutely not. All right, so all these 5 challenges, I mean, some of which may resonate with you, some of it may not. So, question now. Once again, just like what I did earlier, can you just use your mobile device? If you can scan this QR code, it will take you to this question. Once again, take your time, think about it. Which of the following agile challenge do you think may be applicable to your organization or team? So you may select more than one, I believe. I think it's just one. One that's most relevant for you. You may select one. Though there may be more than one answers, or the one you feel is most relevant. Of the 5 challenges that I've shared earlier, which one is the most pertinent for you? Remember, I shared much earlier the Pareto rule, right? 20% of the problems can address 80% of, or give you the 80% results. So what is that main thing? Okay, some responses have come up. Okay. All right. So some of you, okay, look at the percentage perspective of things. So far, 37% of you have indicated leaders who just, for the sake of change, just talk about change and expect leaders or your employees to do that. Very disruptive, right? I see 37% of you mentioned that. 37%. That's quite a large amount. Any more coming? Okay, that's stabilized around this much. Organizations focus on attracting new talent. New talent. So that's interesting. Overly focus on new talent, ignoring existing talent pool, or ignoring engaging with the current employees. 21 of you have shared that. Digital skills, that's interesting. Only 11% indicated. Of course, in finance, you have a lot of data, right? Crunching, analytics, and so on. So that's important. All right. So thank you for sharing. And I probably want to move on. Okay. So that's stabilized at 33, 34%. Brilliant. Any more coming up? No? Okay. Let's move ahead. All right, so let's get to the last part of today's session before we get to the fun quiz. We're almost at the tail end today. So, end of the day, all of you might ask me this question, right? So, thanks, Anath. You have talked about a lot of stuff to do with agility. You have talked about challenges. You talk about different facets and so on. But what can we do practically in our organization? What can we do to boost agility at workplace? I think that's the golden question, right? And I've got one slide for you. And by the way, this slide will be shared to you after this presentation by the organizers. So not to worry, you will have copies of this after this. So we're talking about 12 essential elements. So remember, agile transformation is a process, right? Remember, I spoke with you the difference between agile and agility, right? Agile is just doing, whereas agility is the being. And it takes time for these things to be part of your DNA, to be your mindset, for example. It takes time. So what we have put here is a list of essential elements. So for example, you are going to start with, so I have this order sequence, right? We go with your agility, with agile knowledge and skills, and then tools and techniques. So those would be the training part, right? You get into the training part. And methodology comes next. Got to involve your leaders too, right? What if your leaders don't have knowledge of agility? How are they going to lead in the agile way? How about team empowerment, right? Facets of agility, yes, we talked about 8 and we briefly discussed 4, but in a full-fledged training, you will have full exposure to all of these things. And likewise, digital tools. What about metrics? What's metrics? Metrics here means the measurement. How do you know these things are working for you? So if there's no way to measure agility at workplace and how it affects your bottom line or your OKRs, then none of these things will make any sense to the management. So of course, matrices are important. And remember, comes the next one, which is your mindset, your DNA, right? If agility is going to stick, it must be part of that change process, the DNA, the mindset. And of course, over time becomes a culture, and you've got to see how it becomes part of your knowledge sharing practices in the organization. Okay. So these are elements that can happen in the form of coaching, training, or a combination of them all. Consulting, training, coaching. Some of it just probably just training, some of it all, some of it just one or two. All right. So yes, that sort of wraps up what we're talking about today. So we started the day at about 10 o'clock talking about business case and where we are in terms of agility and how leading regulatory bodies like AICPA and CIMA, they've come together and mentioned very clearly that agility is one of the top 5 skills that finance professionals must adopt. So this is a no-go. It must happen. If it's not today, in the near future. And then, of course, we looked at Agile overview, looking at VUCA, and all of us mentioned that we have these challenges, whether it's the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, or the ambiguity, right? And then we differentiated between agile and agility. Then we look at the benefits. We look at the definition of agility at workplace. Basically, it's the, if you remember, agility at workplace is the ability to adapt quickly. That's the keyword, right? Quickly to changes in environment, market conditions, customer needs, and internal dynamics. All right. And the issue we have at the moment is that there's a lack of understanding and the lack of adoption. And because of that, we need to have the right culture in place to enable that. And we also talk about future of work, omni-connectedness, and productivity anywhere. Both contributes to a staggering 7.4% revenue growth if implemented well. And then we talked about the 8 facets of agility. Remember the 8 facets? We've got organizational agility, we got emotional learning, team agility, we've got technology, leadership, operation, and cultural, right? All these different levels of agility. And we looked at the first four and we went into some detail. And of course, the challenges. And before that, we did the polar bear experiment, remember? And how this emotional agility, the ability for us to pivot this turbulence that's going on inside by not suppressing the thought process, but by using an approach that's mindful, value driven, and purposeful, right? And the challenges at workplace also, we looked at the 5 of them, and all of you able to rank it and share where things are in your organization in terms of these challenges. And lastly, we looked at the 12 essential elements for agility at workplace to happen in your organization, whether it's by way of consulting, training, coaching, mentoring, or a combination of them. Okay, so that brings us to the last part. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, before we get into the Q&A questions, I hope you have questions. Let's keep coming. We will take them after the Kahoot exercise. So I'm going to stop my screen and stop share and share another screen for you to use your mobile phone and scan the QR. Now, before I go into the Kahoot, just check if we are good. Can we proceed to the QR now? Can I just go ahead? Remember, we have Q&A coming up in a while. So do hold your questions. We have that time for you as well. Are we good so far? Can I just check? Yep, thank you for the feedback. Okay. Just give me a minute. I'm going to share my screen. Hey, I hope you can see my screen right now. Yes. So please scan the QR. Okay, we got the first one, Sam inside. Okay, by the way, for those of you who do not know how to play this game, or if you have never played the game, basically you'll have to use your mobile device to click on the right color code as the answer option. The answers will be flashed on the screen and you will click on your mobile device. Okay, remember, your mobile device is where you click your answers and the questions on the screen. And your points you get based on how quick your responses are and how correct. The combination of these two will result in a higher point for you. Okay. Okay, I'll just give another 30 seconds more for the rest to join. So more coming in. Very good. Keep coming. This will be a fun activity to revise what we have covered today. Okay, maybe another 20 seconds to allow everybody to join. Then we can start. Okay, let's start now. Yes, all of those are correct, right? Absolutely. Next question. More than one answers. All right. Next. Double points. Multi-select. Actually, only one answer, right? So productivity anywhere means yes, correct. I think all of you there got correct. Multi-select. Okay, quite funny you mentioned about eating, right? In one of my training, one participant introduced this term for me, eating agility. But even though that might be true, but it's not an official term, right? Multi-select, double points. Okay, you do not need emotional agility as fast learning agile, right? Multi-select, double point. Yep, everything except the green one. Multi-select, double points. Okay, the green one, I know that people will use that strategy also, but that's not the right or the best approach, right? Multi-select, double points. Okay, yes, in fact, everyone benefits, right? Both internal and external stakeholders. So agility benefits almost everyone in the ecosystem. Yes, basically these are the 12 elements and the interventions. Interventions here meaning either by way of consulting, training, coaching, or mentoring, right? Those are the interventions, depending on which type of element. Okay, last question now. Double points. Yeah, so most of you answered that red one, which is true because that's one of the things that curtails or hampers empowerment, right? You cannot have team that were empowered if they are always dictated, directed, told, instructed. These are things that we don't want because they affect empowerment. Okay, that's good. Let's see. Okay. All right. Well done, everyone. So that was a good exercise. And I believe it was a good revision of what we covered today as well. And before we hand over to the organizers, I would like to open the floor for questions. If any burning questions, you can either unmute yourself if that's easier. The question is, what are the prizes? Well, if MIA wants to bestow prizes, we can. I will direct the question to Yati from MIA. But aside from the prizes, right? Thank you, Henry, for that kind words. Are there any areas of clarification, or maybe just an observation? Doesn't have to be a question, right? It can even be observation, you're sharing that you like to. You can unmute yourself if that's easier. If it's too long to type, you can unmute yourself and share. Yup, you mentioned about culture for the change. Would you mind explaining that a bit more while I take on another question from Boon? Okay, Boon's question is, in today's work environment, we are constantly faced with technology disruptions. Yes, moreover, in IT industry, agile practices are becoming more and more popular, such as agile scrum, absolutely scale safe. Yes, as such, to thrive in digital, should the workplace, including the finance professional, adopt and align? Uh, so yes, it's a yes and no kind of question, right? Because you see, you must understand agile is such a huge umbrella, and of course what IT teams are doing may not be directly or 100% similar to the kind of work that you are doing in the finance industry. So why I'm saying is yes, because yes, agile best practices are there, but not in its entire shape and form. So there's agility for operations, agility for projects, agility for leaders. So we need to know what are we doing. And but the other answer, the other question to you is, or rather the response to you is, Boon, absolutely, we need to embrace these things. There's no two way about it, but it's not an exact copy paste. That's what I'm saying. I hope that clarifies your point, Boon Yi. So Yik, you explain, yup, you explain the question, right? Culture for change, you're explaining the resistance to change. Yes. Most employees prefer status quo so that they can remain at the comfort zone. Well, I would agree with you as well. But at the same time, remember that, you see, this is another research that's done, right? People don't fear change because of change alone, you know. They fear change because they do not see the point. They don't see it. And even if they see it, it was not impressed upon them that this change will bring a difference in what they're currently doing. So it's like, okay, so what? That kind of question, you know. So I always tell people that yes, change is important, but it's equally important, more than the change itself, to make it relevant and palatable to the ones who are being susceptible to those change. That is more important than the change itself. I hope I'm making sense. Worse, there are no push motivation from the top. Okay, you mentioned the word push slash motivation, very interesting. Because sometimes it's a carrot, sometimes it's a stick, right? Push and motivation. So the point is that leaders themselves must embrace agility. Remember, one of the elements under the 12 elements mentioned leadership there. If the leaders themselves are not embracing change, or rather understanding agility, how are they going to impress upon the need for such agility across the organization? They must be motivated themselves, right? Yeah, thanks Boni for the kind remarks. Okay, good. That's good. Very good questions, right? Anybody else who wants to unmute yourself or share anything, feel free to do. Maybe you observe something in your organization that you think some of these things might be relevant. Feel free to share. Or you're okay with what you have heard so far and you're hoping to take the next step forward. Okay. Let the questions come. While that's coming, if you're still typing, that's fine. But what I will do now, in the interest of time, I will hand over to the organizers, Yati, who will take this forward. Yeah. So Yati, over to you. The questions can still come. Feel free. Okay, Yati, there's one question that just came. I'll answer that first. By Raini, yeah, the challenge to change mindset of the employees until the KPI being set by the organization. Yes, So this is what I mentioned earlier, right? Between doing and being. So until we move to the being, the KPI has to be there, okay? Because the KPI is there, but people are still in the doing, not in the being. So it's very important to make it purposeful, and to make it palatable to them as in why they are making this change, because we are in the age of transformation. If we keep doing what we're doing, we will keep getting what we've got. And the age of AI, digital transformation, generative AI, agility is the heart of everything. And that is what must come through very strongly. Extremely good question, Noraini. Thank you so much for asking that. Over to you, Yati.
So any question before I do the closing? I think there will be no more questions. So thank you, Dr. Sanat, for your interesting and informative presentation. We have come to the end of the program. On behalf of MIA, we would like to thank Dr. Sanat and to all participants for attending the program. So we hope you find this short webinar useful. And if you are interested to learn more about this topic from Dr. Sanat, for your information, he will be speaking in the upcoming program, Agile Ways of Working for Finance Professional, which will be a physical event. The Agile Ways of Working for Finance Professional event will be held on 19th and 20th September 2024 at CCIC at the Vertical Bangsa South, Kuala Lumpur. So you can see from the screen, and you can scan the QR code to download a copy of the program content now. So for the registration, you also can log in to pd.mia.org.my. Special rate will be offered to those who have participated today. So we are going to have a group photo now. So you hope you can switch on the camera now.
Yes, now we can see all our agile faces. I think you need to capture a few screens, right, Yati? Because a lot of us here today.
Yes, true. But I hope everyone is switched on their camera. If not, I cannot capture the picture.
Oh, you all got share already. Okay, good. Didn't know got such feature. Very agile, you, Yati.
I don't have a chair.
It's no chair. Anybody got no chair, is it? Can you change the view to the larger gallery? Then you can get more.
The gallery. Chair. How to put the chair?
I think some of them are very shy to switch on the camera.
How to put the chair?
The chair will appear automatic actually, right?
Yes.
Peering. Okay.
Just enable your camera, then you will see your chair and your face there. Okay, actually, Yati, when I use my view, I see more people, but I see the less people on the chair,
Me too, also less people in the chair.
So what you do is maybe you can select your option as a large gallery, and then you can see a lot of faces.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're almost ready to get
Okay,
a
I
photo.
think we are ready now.
Yes. All give your best smiles.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, another one. Take 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you everyone. So before you go, I would like to remind again, the e-certificate and CPE credit hours will be awarded if participants remain logged in at least 80% of the program duration and submit the post-course evaluation on learning outcome within 3 days after the completion of the webinar. Late submission of the post-course evaluation will not be entertained. If you require further assistance, please email to sp.alliancemia.org.my. Wish you well and hope to see you in our future event. Thank you. Have a productive day ahead.
Thank you and best wishes to all.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Where's the evaluation?
Evaluation you can see at the confirmation email. We already and we will also post here at the chat box.